When I first heard about the hum, I thought it was just another local legend. Every small town has one. After all, ours was about Black Hollow Forest. They said if you were foolish enough to be in the woods at midnight, you'd hear it. A low, constant hum that seemed to come from nowhere, or everywhere. The kind of sound that made your teeth ache and the hairs on your neck stand on end. Most people laughed it off. A couple of kids even claimed they'd gone out there to hear it for themselves, but no one ever stuck around long. I wasn't a believer, not until that night. It was October when we went out there. Me, Lucas, and Aaron. We were 3 bored college kids home for fall break, desperate for something to do that didn't involve sitting around drinking in someone's basement. Lucas was the one who suggested it. "Let's go hear the hum," he said, grinning like an idiot. "If we survive, we'll be legends." It sounded stupid, but there was something about the way he said it, like a dare you couldn't back down from. Aaron and I exchanged a look. We both knew it was a bad idea, but we went anyway. We parked at the old trailhead around 11:30. The forest was dense and quiet, the kind of quiet that's somehow louder than noise. We brought flashlights, but their beams felt weak against the thick dark. The trees pressed in on us, their bare branches rattling faintly in the breeze. We walked for half an hour before Lucas stopped. "Listen," he whispered. At first, I thought he was messing with us. Then I heard it. A low vibration in the air, so deep I felt it in my chest before I realized I was hearing it. It was constant, steady, not like wind through the trees or distant traffic. It was too smooth, too perfect. Erin grabbed my arm. Her fingers were ice cold. "Let's go back," she said, but Lucas shook his head. "Not yet." The hum got louder as we moved deeper into the woods. At least I think it did. It was hard to tell. After a while, it was like the sound wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside us, in our bones. I could feel it behind my eyes, like pressure building up. Lucas kept going, so we followed. I wish we hadn't. We found the clearing at 12:03 a.m. That's when things got bad. There was something wrong with the clearing. The ground was bare, no leaves or branches, even though the trees around us were skeletal and dead. The hum was loudest there. So loud, it was hard to think. Lucas stood at the center, staring at the ground like he was hypnotized. "Lucas," I said, "we need to go." But he didn't move. Aaron ran to him and grabbed his shoulder. He turned to look at her, and I'll never forget his eyes. They were black, no whites, no iris, just bottomless pits. He smiled, but it wasn't Lucas anymore. It was something else wearing his face. "Too late," he said. The hum changed then. It rose in pitch until it wasn't a hum anymore. It was a scream. We both covered our ears, but it didn't help. It was inside our heads, drilling down into our thoughts. Erin collapsed beside me, blood trickling from her nose. I tried to drag her up, but my arms felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Then the ground in the clearing started to move. At first, I thought it was my vision going blurry, but no. The dirt was rippling, like water, and things were coming up through it. Pale hands, dozens of them. They clawed their way to the surface, dragging pale, eyeless faces behind them. Their mouths were open wide, humming in perfect unison. The sound grew louder, and with it came a cold that burned. I ran. I don't remember how I got out. 1 second, I was in the clearing, and the next, I was crashing through the underbrush, lungs on fire, tears streaming down my face. The hum chased me all the way to the car. I got in and drove without thinking. I didn't stop until I reached the lights of town. Lucas and Aaron never came back. They searched for weeks. All they found was Lucas's flashlight at the edge of the clearing. No footprints, no blood, nothing else. I don't go near Black Hollow anymore. No one does. People say the hum still happens, that if you listen closely at midnight, you can hear it from town. I try not to listen, but sometimes, late at night, lying in bed, I swear I feel it. A low vibration in my bones, a sound waiting for me to remember. And I know if I listen too long, I'll go back. And this time, I won't get out. Second story, in the dark of the forest. The forest had always been a place of mystery, its towering trees swallowing the light long before the sun had fully set. Those who wandered too far found themselves lost in its shadowy embrace, and the villagers spoke in hushed tones of the horrors that lurked within. It was said that something ancient lived there, something that did not take kindly to trespassers. One evening, a group of 4 friends, eager for adventure, ventured into the forest despite the warnings. They laughed off the old tales, carrying flashlights and a tent, confident that the night would be nothing more than an exciting memory. The deeper they went, the denser the woods became, the air turning thick with silence. Not a single bird chirped, nor did the wind rustle the leaves. As they set up camp near an abandoned cabin, an unsettling feeling crept over them. The place looked untouched for years. The wooden walls cracked and splintered, the windows shattered like a forgotten relic of time. One of them, Alex, shone his flashlight through the doorway, illuminating a room filled with decayed furniture and dust-covered footprints leading further inside. Footprints that did not belong to them. They decided to stay outside, unwilling to test the darkness within the cabin, but the unease lingered. As the fire crackled, Emma, the quietest of the group, suddenly shuddered. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The others paused, listening. A faint sound, like a distant whisper, drifted through the trees. It was impossible to tell where it came from, but it sent a chill down their spines. Jake, the bravest of them, scoffed. "Probably just the wind," he said, though his voice held the slightest tremor. But the whispers continued, growing louder, like many voices speaking all at once, yet never making sense. Then came the laughter, soft, childlike, echoing from the darkness beyond their firelight. Panic set in. "We need to leave," Emma insisted, her breath quickening. Before they could gather their belongings, the fire abruptly extinguished, plunging them into an inky void. Their flashlights flickered, barely illuminating the space before them. Something moved in the darkness, shifting between the trees, a tall shadow with glowing eyes. They ran, their breaths ragged, their hearts hammering against their ribs. The forest twisted around them, paths they had taken before now unfamiliar. Branches snagged at their clothes, as though the trees themselves sought to trap them. Behind them, the laughter turned into guttural growls. Alex tripped, falling hard against the damp earth. He turned, gasping, as something emerged from the black, a figure tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its head tilting unnaturally as it watched him. His scream was lost in the night. The others did not stop. They could not stop. They ran until the trees thinned, until the first light of dawn touched their tear-streaked faces. When they reached the village, they collapsed, trembling, unable to speak of what they had seen. Alex was never found. His name became another whispered warning, another story told to those who dared enter the dark of the forest. But the villagers knew the truth. Whatever lived within the trees was not just a story. It was waiting, watching, and it was never alone. Third story, the Devil's Doorway. No one in Black Hollow spoke about the old stone archway hidden deep in the hills. They called it the Devil's Doorway, and even in daylight, people stayed far from it. It was just an arch, they said, standing alone, with nothing behind it but air. But the stories whispered of those who stepped through and never returned. Lena didn't believe in stories. She was a skeptic, always had been. So when she heard about the Devil's Doorway, she laughed. Then she went looking for it. It took her hours to find the arch. The sky was turning red when she reached it. It was taller than she expected, made of rough black stones that seemed to swallow the fading light. Strange carvings covered every inch, symbols she didn't understand, but that made her skin crawl. A cold wind blew through, though the trees were still. Lena stood there, staring, her breath coming faster. Her friends dared her to walk through it. She told them she would, and she did. The world shifted the second her foot crossed the threshold. The air turned heavy. The woods behind her were gone. Only darkness stretched out in every direction, thick and silent. Lena spun around. The doorway stood there, but beyond it wasn't the forest. It was a wall of black stone. A shape moved in the distance. She squinted. It was tall and thin, walking toward her on legs that bent the wrong way. Its eyes glowed dim red. She backed away, but the doorway was gone. Or it had moved. She couldn't tell. The thing came closer. She heard it breathing. A slow, wet rasp. A voice followed. "You opened it. Now you stay." Lena ran, but the ground was soft beneath her feet, like ash. More shapes appeared in the dark, faces pale and empty-eyed. They whispered her name, over and over, until it was all she could hear. She screamed for help. No one answered. She wasn't in Black Hollow anymore. She was beyond the Devil's Doorway, where nothing living belonged, and no one ever saw her again. Some say if you listen at midnight by the old stone arch, you can hear her voice, begging for someone to open the door so she can come home.